Well, greetings, greetings, and welcome to Chapter 3 Sunday Preview. We're on a story and we're on Chapter 3 Joseph from slave to deputy Pharaoh. It's a fascinating story of Joseph from Genesis 37 to 50. Wonderful story of hardship and redemption, of horrible things that were done to him and forgiveness. It's a massive Old Testament story with lots of different lessons. Joseph and God play the primary characters all the way through, and Joseph being faithful to what God was calling him to do in the dream that God gave him, and doing the next right thing. He does the next right thing all the way through his life. He's kind of an upstanding, shining example after all of the stories of dysfunction up until Genesis 36. All kinds of dysfunction. But Joseph really rises to being a shining star and in some ways redeeming all of the family dysfunction before that. If you look on what page is that on? Chapter 3, page 29. There's a timeline at the bottom. Generally, each chapter begins with a timeline. It's just kind of helpful to know what about when this was. It was 1898 BC that Joseph was sold into slavery. He settles. He finally dies in 1805 BC. And the whole story of Joseph is the setting whereby the people of Israel end up in Egypt. At the end of Genesis, they're all down in Egypt, living happily and in harmony with the Egyptians, the Israelis, and the people of Israel and the people of Ishmael. Arabs were all living together in harmony. So it's a wonderful, massively important story in the Old Testament. Joseph had a dream. You probably know that from Joseph and the Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat. Some of you might have seen Donny Osmond play Joseph. I went to see him twice, once with my boys. And it was such an incredible Broadway. It came to Minneapolis a couple of times. It was wonderful to see. So, chapter 2, last chapter, we saw how God called one person, one couple, Abraham, to travel to a place that God would show them. And God promised to make their descendants great and that God would bless them. In chapter 3 now, in the story of Joseph, we see how God continues to partner with people to carry out God's redemptive plan. And we look through the story of Joseph both today and in the sermon on Sunday and on Monday. There's more to the story, a little bit more about kind of understanding the challenges that Joseph went through. But we see in his life how God continues to accomplish God's unbreakable promises. So Joseph is sold into slavery. The Ishmaelites are on their way to Israel. Remember, the Ishmaelites were the tribe that came from Abraham and Hagar. When Sarah said, "Why don't you have a child with my servant Hagar?" Well, they had Ishmael. I talked about that last Sunday in the sermon. The Ishmaelites, the Arabs, were the ones that took Joseph after his brothers threw him into the pit, into slavery. He ends up in Egypt in Potiphar's house. Joseph always did the next right thing. He always pushed his cart back at Fred Meyer. He was always making sure that his bed was made in the morning, always doing the next right thing. And so as he was sold as a slave in the Potiphar's household, he did really well, and Potiphar, an Egyptian, kept on promoting him. But as he was doing well there, he was also starting to be noticed by Potiphar's wife, who tried to solicit him for a rendezvous. Joseph said no, because Joseph always did the next right thing. So Joseph goes into prison, but even there, he does good work, and he is promoted to be kind of the head of the prisoners, okay? And he ends up interpreting a couple of dreams for the cupbearer and the baker, who then get out. Finally, he's recognized. Pharaoh calls him to interpret a dream for Pharaoh, okay? So Joseph is about 30 years old by that time. He's been away from his family since he was 17. So he goes into the Pharaoh's household and starts getting promoted there. He interprets Pharaoh's dream, who had 7 lean cows and 7 fat cows coming out of the water. Pharaoh said, I don't know what to make of this dream. Joseph says, okay, the 7 lean cows are 7 years of famine. The 7 fat cows are 7 years of plenty. The fat cows come out first, meaning that there will be plenty of harvest. The 7 lean cows come out of the water in Pharaoh's dream after the fat cows. Joseph says that's going to be 7 years of famine. So Joseph works with Pharaoh to build storehouses for grain, and that lasts them through the 7 lean years. So it's a massive story. And Joseph's brothers come down from Israel looking for food. There's a whole interaction there. Joseph is something they don't even recognize him because he's dressed differently, and besides, he's in a position of power. He's not the young little kid brother that they threw into the pit. So it's a massive story of forgiveness, of redemption. Joseph finally forgives his brothers, and the whole tribe of Israel come down into Egypt, where they lived in harmony for 400 years. The people of Israel and the people of Ishmael, the Arabs down there, living together in Egypt. Now, at the end of the book, page 473, there are discussion questions there, and what I suggest is that every once in a while you just put aside the reading and go to the back, especially as you get to the end of the reading. Go to the back, page 473, and just read through some of the stories, some of the questions there that come from the story of Joseph. Why did Joseph's brothers want to get rid of him? Why does God allow hurtful things to happen to people? What are the positive effects of Joseph being sold into slavery? How can you know that you can trust God at all times, even when bad things happen? Lots of questions like that come up from this story of Joseph, story of trauma, of difficulty, of challenge, of things that were done very negatively to him, and yet because he always did the next right thing, Joseph arose to the top, not only in his family, but also in the Pharaoh's household. It's a wonderful story, and I hope you enjoy it. Come to church on Sunday. We'll talk a little bit more about it. On Sunday, October 2nd, we're having Bob Boak talk about the Oasis Village in the Adult Forum, so come and be a part of that. It's going to be a good weekend, and I look forward to this time with you, and enjoy chapter 3, the reading of Joseph from a slave to the deputy Pharaoh, always doing the next right thing. I look forward to seeing you again. Until then, you take care. Bye-bye.